Hi, it's David Parrish again, and I'm here to join you with our video blog from World Missions and Evangelism. We are in a series of video blogs where we're talking about the history of the movement that is now happening in Honduras and Latin America. And the last 2 weeks on our blog, we had a roundtable. We had Randy and Linda and Keith and Juanita Travis here with us up here at our office, and we took a couple of kind of extended blogs to let them tell a little bit about the story, about some of the things that happened in them launching out to becoming a part of the project. Today, what I would like to do is I want to give you some of those early days again of this specific project. And this is kind of the beginning stages of how did we get started. You know, today there are 696 groups and churches in Honduras and also in some of the surrounding countries there. 696. A multiplying movement is happening among people. 1,300 people have been baptized in this project since January of this year. Between January and the end of June 2014, 1,300 people were baptized. God is doing a movement. It is God's work. It's amazing. It's marvelous in our eyes. We are watching God's hand at work. But how did we begin to plant the seed? What's the initial stages? Because one thing about church planting movement strategy or disciple making movement strategy is it's a slow process at the beginning. You know, making disciples is a one-on-one thing. You know, all 1,300 people that have been baptized between January and June this year in Honduras, each one of those are 1,300 individuals with individual journeys and a discipleship path that they're on. And a movement, a multiplying movement actually starts with just one seed. And from that seed, then it multiplies to the next level. And then there's more disciples. And then those disciples make disciples. Well, now we're at a point in Honduras where we're beginning to see some reports that are like larger numbers of people, larger numbers of groups. In the last report, which was 3 months long, in 3 months, 175 groups began. But it didn't start that way. And as a matter of fact, it started very, very slow. Because you're planting the seed, and then there's a time to water the seed, and there's a time for the seed to grow, and then there's a time for the harvest. In our story up to now, we've told how we've been on a journey to learn about church planting, about church planting movements, how God led us in this process. We talked about principles, the lessons that we've learned on the journey. Get a passion, become a learner, get started in obedience, don't quit learning, keep asking questions, pray until something happens, and joining God in His work. And today I want to talk about laying the foundation, before we got started in Honduras, we had to lay a foundation in Honduras. And that's just basically a lot of work. And we spent almost 2 years in laying a foundation to get started. In September of 2006, myself and Randy Travis took a training in Dallas, Texas with David Watson. And we learned the principles, the strategy, the CPM strategy. If you want to know more about that, you can look on our video webpage on our YouTube channel and go down the page, and we have lots of videos about what are those principles, what are the general big picture principles. We learned those principles. And that week of September 11th through 15th, 2006, God dropped a passion and a vision in Randy Travis's heart and in my heart to see a movement catalyzed in Honduras. And so the very next week, I flew with a group of people to West Africa, to one of the countries to Sierra Leone, where one of the places where the Ebola outbreak is happening right now. And I know people, by the way, that are there and have asked us for prayer, and we need to lift those people up in great prayer. and thank God for the doctors and people that are ministering over there. But I went there, and we saw the beginning of a church planting movement, a disciple making movement on the ground there. It was fascinating. It was amazing. And we came back with an understanding in general of the principles. And so Randy and I, we said, let's go for it. So you heard in the previous two roundtable video blogs that God was at the same time dealing with Keith Travis and telling him, go back to Honduras. I have a work for you there. And he didn't know what all it was. He just, so he called his dad, and his dad said, we're getting ready to move back to Honduras. We're going to begin something new. We're going to try to lay a foundation for a church planting movement. And so in December of 2006, Randy and Keith Travis and Richard Crowder, another one of our WME missionaries, made a research trip to Honduras. Of course, they had been there many times, but they went there this time to look for where should we get started. The first step in laying the foundation after getting the vision was doing research on the ground. And they drove through community after community after community, and they spent time in the region and in the country of Honduras, studying and asking questions and interacting with people in communities and meeting lost people and seeing where is there a need for a multiplying movement. And out of all that process, they came back the end of December, somewhere in the mid or in December of 2006, and Randy told me, he said, I believe the western part of Honduras, in the mountainous areas of the western part of Honduras, is where we'd like to begin, where we'd like to do this. He had founded a group of churches in years past. They had a few churches in that region, but not very many. Most of their churches were in another part of Honduras. And so Randy said, that's the area. So he said, let me put something together for you. In January 2007, Randy came and met with me, and he had created a beautiful document. And it was a step-by-step, based on the training he had taken from David Watson, and based on his recent research trip and his other missionary knowledge from years of experience. He put together a strategic plan. He wrote it down. It was probably 25, 30 pages long. I've got it around here somewhere in this very office. And he created this document, and he presented it to me. He said, here's a strategic plan toward going down, recruiting some leaders and beginning to train them, and how we would implement this thing. And we put this strategic plan. It was a beautiful plan. Let me tell you something about strategic plans. There's a saying in the military that says, no strategic plan survives contact with the enemy. And that's true in warfare, and that's true in the advance of the kingdom of God. I can tell you that original strategic plan that Randy put together and we looked at in January of 2007 is really nothing like what actually has happened, other than we've seen a lot of disciples, a lot of people baptized. But other than that, almost everything has changed. But the value of having that initial strategic plan was just to have a plan, some steps to take the first step. You know, you do make plans when you go forward, but you have to be flexible in your plans when you're going to make disciples, because we're not manufacturing cars, we're not manufacturing widgets, it's not a cookie cutter project. We're dealing with people here. And people are not just going to be processed like on an assembly line. That's not how you make disciples. You make disciples through relationships, and there's ups and downs, and it's a slow process sometimes. But you're doing it because you love those people and you love God. But we had to have a strategic plan to say, we're going to start here, we're going to establish here, we're going to establish a base here, we're going to recruit some people, we're going to begin to train people. And that's exactly what we did. And so he brought that strategic plan to me. And I took it to the board of directors of World Missions and Evangelism. The board of directors approved it, and the plan called for him and his family to move there in May or June of that year. So between that time, between January and June of 2007, we spent time refining that initial strategy and trying to raise some funds for it, The finances were kind of tough, and we kind of talked about that on the last round table. It was during that time that we said, we're going to move you this month. We're going to move, and things didn't. And I was on a mission trip, and I felt like the Holy Spirit said to me, tell them to go on down. And I really balked at that. I got home from the mission trip. The next day, Randy called me and he says, I know the funds aren't raised, but we're going to go ahead and take a step of faith. We're going to move. I said, well, that's what God told me. I wasn't going to tell you, but that's exactly what God told me. And so they took a step of faith. During that time, they continued to study. We got some more training from David Watson. And then down, they moved in June of 2007. Got down in Honduras, moved into that western part, into an area where they knew absolutely nobody, and began to find places to live and began to lay the foundation. And during the next 6 months to almost a year, between June of 2007 and the first day of May 2008, so the next 11 months, what did we do? We laid a foundation. What do you mean laid a foundation? Well, we developed a place for them to live down there, and they rented some places. We found a place that a team of people could live, of Hondurans could live and could be trained. We created a training base there to train initial people in the strategy. And Randy took all the principles and everything that he had learned during his research phase from September to that, for the previous September to that time, and he began to write a curriculum, a training curriculum. And he spent months and months on the curriculum. And then we began to ask the question, what's going to be our access ministry? One of the principles of church planting movements is access ministry. And that means some kind of ministry or service whereby you enter into the community. And at that time, we've done many different things since then. But that time, initially, the concept came that well drilling, clean water is a real problem in many of those communities, many of those villages in that region. And so we said, let's look about that. So we found a well drill and bought a well drill and got it shipped to Honduras. A missionary friend of ours, Brother Darrell Dakin, helped us to ship our well drill to Honduras. And then they had the well drill down there. Then they had to learn how to use it because none of them had ever drilled a well before. And it was a step-by-step process. So it was in the developing of all of that, the writing of the curriculum to train people, the getting the well drilling, learning how to do that, making logistical plans. How are we going to get out into this village? We're going to develop a team, and we're going to send teams out 2 by 2 into villages. How are we going to do that into these villages? And so we said motorcycles. So we began to research, can we get some motorcycles? And a donor came along and helped us buy I think 14 or 15 motorcycles in Honduras. And then we had to recruit a team of people, and none of them knew how to ride a motorcycle or knew anything about CPM. And so it was laying that foundation. It was work from June of 2007 until May the 1st, 2008. Lay the foundation. And the last part of laying the foundation was for Randy to go and to begin to share the vision with some of God's people, to talk to some leaders and some people that he already knew down there in Honduras, and to say, this is a brand new thing in a brand new area, and it's a brand new strategy. It's really an old strategy. It's the biblical strategy, but we're gonna adapt this biblical strategy in a different way than the way it's been applied here in Honduras. And we're looking for people that would, I think initially he asked, would give a year of their life to helping us start this strategy in this country. Well, guess what? God provided, I think initially 14 men. And some of them were married and some were not, and some brought their families over. And they relocated. 14 men and some of their families moved from one part of Honduras to this place in the western part of Honduras, and to what we had developed, a training base there. It was a little building. It was a place where all those families could live in one building, and they got to learn community living. And it had a classroom and a whiteboard, and all of this had been developed during all these previous months. And so on May the 1st, 2008, the team of 14 men and some of them with their families, some children were there, living at the base. On May the 1st, 2008, Randy and Keith Travis began to train our initial team of 14 people. They laid the foundation and they began to train on May the 1st, 2008. These people who were being trained were all believers. Some of them had been pastors. Some of them had been leaders of a church network. One of them had been a leader of a whole church network before. A lot of them had been pastors. Some of them had been what we would call laymen. We don't like that term because there's really no such thing as a lay Christian. Everybody's full-time believer. But what the world or the traditional church sometimes calls a layman, some of them had come from just that background. They were farmers. One of them was an 18-year-old young man who just had finished high school and said, I'll give a year of my life to that. By the way, he's not given a year of his life to that. That young man has given all these years. He's one of our major leaders. Many, many groups and churches are under him today. He's 24 years old today. But this was the team of 14. And Randy began to train them and mentor them in the strategy of church planting movements and disciple-making movements, how to ride a motorcycle, how to find a person of peace. A 2-month training sequence began that went from May through the whole month of June 2008. The end of June 2008, I flew down, helped them finish the training, and then flew home. They took a little break, and on July the 23rd, 2008, a couple of the men had not been able to make it through the training. So at that point, there were 12 men on the team, plus Randy and Keith, and then some of their wives and families. The 1,200-man team deployed out on July the 23rd, 2008, to go to the first villages to find a person of peace and to find need and meet it, and to find places where they needed water wells drilled and drill it as an act of love and mercy and help for that community. They left for the first villages. They went 2 by 2 on July 23rd, 2008. And that's where I'll leave it. I'll leave it there because the foundation had been laid. It took us a year from September of 2006, when Randy and I met David Watson and were trained, from September 2006 until June 2007, it was research and study and a strategic plan developed. From June of 2007, the Travises moved to Honduras. And from June of 2007 until May of 2008, they developed the curriculum, recruited the team, developed the training base. And then the initial team was trained May through June of 2008. And they went into the very first villages looking for people of peace in July 2008. The foundation had been laid. Now what was going to be built on it? We'll begin to talk about that next week. God bless you. Thanks for watching.